of May and we're in the Kokoda Hall at the Cairns RSL Club. Can you please say your name?
Hi Beck, Adrian Pearson.
And your date of birth?
10th of July 1955.
And your current address?
Current address? Clifton Road, Clifton Beach, 4879.
And what was your branch of service?
I was in the Navy, senior service.
And your and your rank?
I ended up retiring as a Lieutenant Commander.
And did you see any theatres of war?
No, didn't see any theatres of war, but did see pre-Resolute up in on patrol boats. A lot of activity then.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get into a little bit of your background growing up, and then we'll go into some questions on your defence experience. So growing up, where were you born?
I was born in Balmain Hospital in Sydney. I was there for a couple of years, and then my parents moved up to Tamworth, New South Wales, where I lived for 15 years, and then I joined the Navy. So Tamworth, country music capital, I couldn't get out of there quick enough.
Yeah, so what was it like growing up in Tamworth?
Wonderful. Great, no abuse, I had a wonderful family life. 2 sisters, great high school. It was just a great atmosphere. You look back at now, the hills were just behind my house in a city of 30,000 people, and you could do trapping and chasing rabbits, whatever, or you very keen into sport. Tamworth's a great sporting city, so I played basketball, tennis, squash, swimming, you name it.
You're a real athlete.
Wasn't I done? I represented New South Wales in my high school days, but and also just before I joined the Navy, I was offered to go professional tennis player. I was pretty not too bad. I was a professional tennis coach at 17, but it would have been too much 8 hours a day training and living in a tent at Wimbledon, etc. So decided to go and see the world in the Navy.
Yeah. And what are your fondest memories of your youth?
Just so much to do. Great parents. It allowed us, myself and my sisters, to do lots of things, and particularly playing sport, travelling all around Australia, and my parents giving me that opportunity, and having a great mob of friends, who to these days I still see them.
Yeah. Now, were you the golden child, or were you a mischievous child?
No, I was a very Victorian child. I've had very Victorian parents, so I was the eldest. So I had to do everything proper, and my mum was real tough on me. And then, as I find out over the years following, it got slacker and slacker till my youngest sister got away with murder. Unfortunately, my second sister, or my sister behind me, she was, you should do as good as Adrian, and you've got to do better and whatever. So I feel sorry for her, but youngest sister swore at my mother and everything, and I've never to this day said boo to my mother, who unfortunately passed away, but she was very strict, and I'm very grateful, because I think good manners and discipline is good.
It would have prepared you for your defence experience.
Yes, to a degree, but defence experience built on it, which is fantastic.
Yeah. So let's get into your defence history, actually. So how old were you when you joined?
I was 17. I was just 17, so I was the youngest in my group, just about. I think there was only one younger than me, he came from WA, but at 17 and went straight into Naval College, which was an interesting shock.
Where were you living at the time?
Well, I was at Tamworth.
Yeah.
I was in the country, and my mother had someone she'd known who was a captain, and he was a defence attaché, so it sounded nice. And then just before about year 11, a naval officer came to the school, and he looked so prim and proper in his bow tie and everything. And the girls swooned, and I thought, wow, get a man in uniform, join the Navy, see the world. That's what I did, and it turned out pretty good.
And why did you pick the branch of service that you joined? Is it because of that experience?
It was partly that experience, and then also having someone my mother knew very well, and it gave me a reference. And the Navy just seemed fantastic, because it was the one that went everywhere.
Yeah.
And the Army would have been too difficult for me. I had been in the Air Cadets, so the Air Force cadets looked good, but the army looked too hard.
And do you recall your first days in service?
Indeed. We all joined day one in Sydney, got this great big box of uniforms, etc. Then we got in these Bedford buses, all in our seats. They filled the whole aisle with all these boxes, so you couldn't get in or out. And then we left Sydney for Jervis Bay in these old Bedford rickety buses. We went on forever all day, and then we got to Nowra and we went off to the windy road off to Creswell, 22 kilometres or something away, and we all just kept saying, where are we going? Then we got to Naval College, and the other cadets at the college just had a field day. They had a field day. So it was, you're in the wrong uniform, and I'd been shaving for 4 or 5 years, and you get this other little cadet that comes up that's been at the college, and I don't like how you've shaved, sir, mister. Off you go, and you'd lose your line in the position in the line in the Scran Hall or the food hall that evening, and you'd have to come back half an hour later, and it was interesting, but it was different and it was exciting.
What did it feel like?
Very strange. It's the first time also, you'd been away from the family unit, so you're on your own. But then fortunately there was sort of 60 or 70 others that were on their own, so you quickly sort of bonded with people that you knew, or that you got to know that they were experiencing the same thing, and you just sit around and have a chat. And some of those early chats with colleagues turned out that I'm still chatting to them 45 years later.
So tell me a little bit about your time in basic training.
Basic training went for about 2 or 3 years. It actually goes longer than that usually, till you get your certificate for your ship, that you can be an officer to watch, so that might take 4 or 5 years. But at college was 2 years at college. It was sort of like the Naval College was part of University of New South Wales for those that did degrees. I was told I wasn't smart enough, so I did a on-the-job training course called the Creswell course, and it was a combination of theory, mathematics, war history, navigation, seamanship, sailing, whole series. So it was professional and academic, and it was interesting. It was hard. They certainly, it was like a university course, but it was exciting. A lot of drill, and the factor is that still to my day it was probably one of the most beautiful sights in Australia. Jervis Bay is, like my alma mater. I have surfed back there on staff at times. My daughter has gone through there, and it's very unique to have sort of father and daughter and have the history going through the same establishment. It's just a beautiful spot, and when you've got to go and do a torturous PT session, but it's on the whitest beach in Australia, it's just or you've got to do a cross-country course through the National Forest, and you've got to dodge kangaroos but still come out on a beach and do the last mile along the beach. It's just magic. So it was tough, but ideal setting and good friends and a good education.
And do you remember your instructors?
I remember my first divisional officer. He was a Kiwi, a very old gentleman, and he was wonderful. He was absolutely the father figure. He'd kick your bum when he needed it, but he was a very, very wonderful father. And if you had any difficulties, he'd sit there and talk to you.
Do you recall any funny stories or incidences that happened?
Lots of. One of the funniest was, it was pretty stupid, but we'd all gather, and we'd gather the dining hall at night, and it's a very traditional dining hall, and there's no one, and particularly when you were senior cadets, you ran the dining room as such. All the junior cadets had to ask to be seated and all that sort of stuff. But then some of my colleagues would just, they'd play up like, often you didn't eat the custard because you knew it was full of bromide, and bromide kept your sexual in vigour to nothing, because there's no women around in my days. But cheapish meals to produce, like you'd have banana and custard, and it'd come in a huge pot, and you'd serve yourself, and But when it was over, a couple of my colleagues decided to see how many bowls of banana and custard they could eat to set the record. You know, watching these people eat 19 bowls was just crazy. Other things like, you know, for your birthday, doesn't sound very funny, but you know, you'd kidnap one of your classmates and you'd drag him down and tie him to the mast of one of the yachts in the harbour and leave him there overnight. And it gets really cold in the middle of winter. So, you know, not really good, but quite funny to us at the time. And plenty of others. It was. Oh, the other funniest thing is they teach you as a naval officer how to dance, but there was no women. So we would go into a dance studio in town, 40 of us, and we'd dance with each other. And, you know, that was terrible. So, you know, but it should have been good. You should have learned properly how to dance, but when you're dancing with your mate, it's just not quite the same. So there was a lot of things that were supposed to be proper for you, but just the situation didn't allow it.
What was your primary job after training?
After training, I was basically operational. So initially I was an assistant principal warfare officer, which is the tactical side of the Navy. So you're in the ops room, you're the captain's representative, you're his tactical advisor. So after lots of different courses, you got on the ship, you've got usually the captain and the XO, executive officer, and then after that would be the principal warfare officers. So my basic was anti-submarine warfare, and so I specialised in that. So effectively, anti-submarine warfare was my technical side of the branch, and I was the expert of that on the ship. And then subsequent ones, I was in America teaching with the US Navy in anti-submarine warfare. I was the OIC of the ASW school at Watson's Bay, so I was responsible for all training of ASW officers and sailors, not submariners, but the surface side. So very much my background is in warfare and training.
Mm-hmm. So what places have you been posted to, and which one was your favourite?
Hard to say a favourite. I did a year in England during the Falklands War in '82. Then I did 82 to 84. I commissioned HMAS Sydney in Seattle with the FFG 03. And then a couple of years later I came back to the States and did 3 years exchange with the US Navy. So I was paid by Australia, but I reported to a US Admiral, and so I was responsible for training coordinated ASW ops. So I had oceanographers and aviators and submariners and oceanographers, and we do major carrier battle group anti-submarine warfare operations. And then every 3 months, for 3 weeks, I'd have to go on a mobile training team to Hawaii and teach there for 3 weeks, and in between snorkeling and diving and playing tennis for a week, so that was pretty good. And then we take that occasionally also to Yokosuka in Japan, and then about 3 months of each year I used to be on USS Nimitz, and we go to sea to trial different tactics. So that was a wonderful posting. Came back, so they were my overseas postings. Also did a lot of time on courses in the UK and Canada. Back in Australia, the OIC of the school was wonderful, but most probably not overseas. Well, overseas, most probably San Diego was the great. In Australia, it was having command up here in Cairns.
Yeah, well, I guess that leads into my next question, which is what rank are you most proud to have earned and why?
Well, I was very pleased to make Lieutenant Commander. Why is because I stayed in that long. But and the reason I didn't go on was that at that stage people weren't retiring, so you had this full group of people and we're all going around in circles. And that just didn't interest me, so that's why I looked elsewhere at that stage. I was just getting a little tired of not having the career. The next level was commander, but there were so many commanders, people weren't getting promoted. That whole system's changed now, which I think is wonderful. It lets people flow through.
Tell me about some of the special people you've met during your service time.
Wow, friends overseas, people I'd served with. But out here, in my later years, those that were senior to me were in training groups ahead of me, I think. Commodores and admirals, they've all moved on to, but they were working with us when we had patrol boats, etc. But also some of the friends I made at Naval College. One was my best man, I still see him. The other colleague is in Adelaide, I still catch up with him. But also the crew from HMAS Sydney. Now, it's really scary when you've commissioned a ship and now it no longer exists. You really feel old. So Sydney was around for 33 years. It's now in the scrap heap after 2 years. But we just had the 35th reunion of that crew, and 110 out of 200 serving members at that stage appeared with their wives, etc. So it's really fantastic to be in touch with a lot of those people. Some of them, one's a sheriff in San Diego and he comes out for it. So it's that crew is really bonding, and that's very rare. That you've got maybe the Sydney Association, which is the 4 Sydneys, but this one's just a special commissioning crew that commissioned the ship. It's a special group. So you've got lots of friends over 35 years.
So tell me a funny story you experienced that could only happen in the military.
Oh wow! Overseas is usually a funny spot. What could we do? Okay, I'm just trying to think what's a really, really funny story. Look, this is most probably not overly savoury to most people, but I remember way back in the 70s there was the attack patrol boats, and we were up in Cairns. Sorry, we were in Darwin back in the late 70s, and we were doing what we call gunline off Darwin, stopping the Vietnamese boat people that were coming down. So anyway, the A boats were very basic. You had 25 crew. They were tiny, very basic. But the life of the boat was dependent usually on the chef. But we had this chef that was really funny, really mischievous. Like, you'd all be sitting out on the back of the boat and you'd have your movie screen up and he'd come by and, always the first sailors that were there, he'd bring pies out or something and they'd walk by. And he'd often put Tabasco sauce on the top of them, so as they grabbed them, they'd eat them. But he didn't like seagulls. So often he would put Tabasco sauce on some bread, and then he'd put it on a fishing line. He'd throw it over the side, and they'd swoop down and they'd grab it, and then they'd go up in the sky, and he'd play them like a kite. Now, you could only do that in the military. Not very good for the environment. There's lots of things like that. I remember. We're in Singapore and we were all gone ashore, and one morning coming back, and this is way back in the early 80s where Singapore wasn't as clean as it is now. And I remember after a very long night, one of the crew came back with a monkey and tried to bring it on board. Now, for the XO of the ship, trying to part the monkey away from the man, the sailor, because monkeys aren't allowed on board, and he bought this monkey. It was the funniest thing watching for 2 hours as these drunken sailors on the wharf crying because they're trying to take his monkey away. So that just goes on and on over the years.
Yeah. So beer, sex and games. What fun is there when you are on deployment?
Beer, sex and games. Well, not a lot of sex. It's changed these days as well with AIDS, etc. Even way back in the 80s, a lot of sailors won't go looking for sex anymore. In the early days, one of the contraceptives they did use was they'd use 2 condoms, and in between the condoms they'd put heat rub, so that when he was doing the deed with the lady, if the first condom broke, she'd feel the deep heat and she would run away. So that was the first one. But beer, lovely tasting beer around the world. But a lot of it times were meeting at the cocktail party, meeting some of the residents, meeting the embassy staff. And, from the early 80s, mid 80s, I was at sea a lot. Had 2 little children at home, 2 lovely little girls. So a lot of the times the embassy wives would take you to the local markets where you weren't going to get robbed, and with their help, they'd help you buy beautiful little outfits, etc. And this happened with a lot of the officers on board. They'd sort of do that thing. Or, you know, good friends at the embassy would also help them go to the right spot to buy computers and gifts, etc. So, but it also gave you the opportunity to go and see a lot of the world, like up in Indonesia, Anjang, Pandang. You know, local people would take you an hour's drive into the countryside and see the most incredible waterfalls. I remember 3 of us were sitting on this raft, which was just 6 bamboo sticks. And the guy doing it down these rafts, he was blind. So, you know, all sorts of funny things, but you got to see the world.
And how did you stay in touch with your family when you were
In those days, it was just by letter. And occasionally you ring them from, when you got ashore, you'd find a phone box and fill it full of coins and ring home. My daughter's now in the military and she's served everywhere. You know, now it's satellite and, you know, you can ring anywhere. My first amazing thing when I was on the patrol boat, they gave me a phone which I could use at sea, you know, 30 kilometres off the ocean. And it was a box. It was a huge big box, the phone. You couldn't carry it, you just sit on the deck and ring. So, you know, that was the first era, and that was in the 90s. So before that, it was just letters or phoning when you were away, and we didn't have internet, it didn't exist. We were ancient.
Must have been hard for you and the family.
It was, but it made when you got into harbour and the first mailbags come on board, sensational. But it made it hard. If you didn't get a letter, then you felt pretty sad. Or a letter had come to some of the troops in your division and there was a Dear John letter or something. So, yeah, there was good and bad. But also at times, in 1977 I went to England on Brisbane and with HMS Melbourne and one of the Kiwi ships. And anyway, it was 8 weeks or whatever to get to England. And you know, sometimes they'd send all these bags to us, you know, to a port, HMS Brisbane, Australia, and often we didn't have any mail because the post offices sent it to Austria.
Oh.
Yeah, so that happened a lot. So then you'd get the mail bags 4 weeks later, and all the letters, you'd already got another step that continued, so the first letters you got were ancient. So.
What was the best and worst military food you were served and why?
Some of the food at Naval College was pretty basic. They cooked in, well, it was the first time we'd eaten where they cooked in big numbers. So, you know, if they tried to do silver beet or spinach, they'd just boil it to death. Or you'd eat corned beef, which just wasn't the nicest. So they put you off a bit. Also, when we were on the patrol boats, particularly in the 70s, we only had 95 cents a day for each person. So you really had to make your money go. And you'd leave harbour, and within a week or two, you had no food left, or you had minimal food. And you know, you have to pick up food in Gove, and that's not the greatest place. But in those days, with the way you ran in the Gulf, you know, you'd exchange a lot of a slab of beer or some magazines or some fresh loaves of bread the chef had made for, you know, big slabs of prawns, or in those days when the Moreton Bay bugs got in their nets or whatever, or big fish, you know, it was a pest to them. So they'd throw it away. So we'd come along and say hello, and they'd let us get on the nets and take all this food. So, and often the rangers would say, look, if you're down in the Wesley group, would you like you to cull a couple of deer because, you know, the big buck's got another mate or something. So you'd go down there and you'd shoot a specific one, and if you had a good chef, he'd bleed it, he'd cut it all up, and by the time you got back to harbour, you had freezers full of fresh seafood and deer and everything. And so you'd split it all up amongst the crew, and they'd all go home with an esky, and that was good. But you really sort of had to do that to survive. But they were interesting days. But, you know, also sometimes at sea when you didn't have a lot, you had some pretty lousy food, but the chef could do what he could do.
Yeah.
And that a lot of the ships, they say the military run on food. Well, it's true. If you've got a fantastic chef, the crew will be so happy. If you've got someone that's lazy, then you almost have mutiny. But that's all part of the defence.
And were there any significant events that happened during your service history?
Yes, a couple. One was an incident when I was driving Bendigo. We were in the Cook Islands and we had a plane overdue for a number of hours, and the Prime Minister asked us to go to sea. And that night, at about midnight, off the coast, about 60 kilometres, we came across a very smelly area of avgas fuel, etc. And anyway, through that night, we found 4 survivors, 4 bodies, and 2 were never recovered. So that stuck in my mind. And then it's funny, also while we were in Cairns, I used to have to go every year in the middle of winter for 3 months. They'd send my boat from here to Hobart and then go 400 kilometres south of Tasmania to do fisheries patrol and inspect 75 Japanese trawlers down there. And it got pretty cold. We'd actually have to stop in Sydney on the way south to get warm clothes, jumpers and submersible suits, etc. And that was interesting when you're in 5 or 6 metre seas and howling winds, and you've got to lower a boat every half an hour and chase them through the night for a week. So usually about a week without sleep for all the crew, because we'd have to look for these 75 boats over 100 by 100 miles. Exciting times.
Just dropped it.
Actually, that was exciting too, because it gave us an opportunity to go to the west coast of Tasmania and get into Macquarie Harbour at Strahan. And I actually, with the people of Strahan, we organised we didn't have them on board, but we organised with all the experts, and we took the patrol boat up the Franklin River, which I don't think had ever been done before, and I thought that was wonderful. But on my way back to Sydney, I was told to call into Sydney and see the Admiral. And when I went in, he asked me why did I take the boat up there, and I said, well, it was a navigation exercise. But apparently, without me knowing it, the Burnie newspaper had also wanted to know why the patrol boat was up there, and there was flashbacks to the days of the Franklin River demonstrations, and they flew the F-111s or whatever over the top, so Tasmanians all of a sudden thought there was something going on the Franklin River. So sometimes you just cannot think outside the box far enough.
And how did your military experience affect your life today?
I think it made me confident. I think it helped me with management and leadership, and they're two totally separate different things. It also, which the Navy and the military is pushing heavily, is integrity, honesty, whatever. And I think you've been in positions in the military, you look at that's the camaraderie that everyone abides by. So that gives me that outside, and it's helped me into management positions and my life after the military. And I think that's great for all military people. And you can see a distinction at times who's been in the military or not, because there's some things you just won't do, and you look and think, why are they doing that? But it's certainly helped me prepare myself for the rest of my life, and it gives you a standard.
And when you transitioned out of defence, how hard was it for you to settle back into civilian life?
I didn't have a real issue. Of course, I was away a lot, and then I went on to a senior position in the government, which kept me away a lot, so it kept me busy. Unlike a lot of people I know that transition out, there's a long period where they've got nothing. They're looking for a job, and it takes time, and in the present climate, there's supposedly good employment rate, etc. But for all the military people with their expertise, it's hard to find that initially. So I feel for them, but in my case, I was very, very blessed.
Do you recall the day that your service ended?
I do. The day I left up here, I actually then went on 12 months leave with my long service, etc. So the actual day was 12 months later, which you go and you do a medical. But the actual day I left in uniform, yes, was exciting because I was going on, but it was it was 23 years that had come to a finish, and you don't really know till a bit later how significant that day is. Your closeness of your people, your camaraderie, etc., is not out there. You know, you're on your own far more. The military looks after you, even not the best of cases, but there's something always there, and the support and the things you get, free medical, etc., etc. And the day you leave that, it's a big day. Everyone's there. Congratulations, goodbye. But that's the last day you take your uniform off, unless in future you come back into reserves, etc. But continuous full time, that's a real sad departure.
So what did you do in the days or the weeks afterwards?
Well, as I said, I went straight to Brisbane, moved the family the next day, and we headed to Brisbane for a new job. So it's pretty exciting, and the unknown was that. And I suppose the hardest was, you're with the family now, and you're going to be with them for forever and ever, and unless you know what next job you've got. You're anticipating you're not going to be away for 8 weeks and home for 2, or on deployment for 6 or 8 or 9 months, which people are doing to Afghanistan now, or deployment on ships, etc. So they're behind you. So it's a new era that you're going to have with your family. And when you're in the military, I missed a lot of time with events about my daughters growing up, school, special events. So new life with the family. So that's very different.
So what did you go on to do as a career after your service?
I went into senior government and private sector management positions in operations and state managers for quarantine and air freight and the waste industry. So I went up the chain in a lot of management positions. So I was very fortunate. But that only comes at times because you've got to really sell yourself. Ex-defence with your qualifications, which a lot of people in the military don't, and that's sad because they have fantastic skills. Anyone that doesn't employ an ex-defence person just doesn't know what they're missing out on.
And looking back on your service time, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
In my service time, wow, I think every time, your next job was always so different. In the military, you step up careers, and one job is training you for the next one, etc., etc. So often going into a new position was quite, you had to be a fast learner, and your responsibility is always, anywhere in defence, every member is a member of the team. And if he doesn't do their job, or she, then the whole team can fail. So getting into a position, your next job, coming up to speed quickly and then being productive to that team is a huge, big thing that's in your mind. And then you get posted to command, or you go to America into a job that you're going to work with the Yanks. Are you good enough? Are you well enough trained? Are you going to make an embarrassment of yourself? Or are you going to be as good as them, if not better? These are all the things going. You're going to command. Wow, I've got 30, 40, 50 people or 200 people under me. Can I lead that ship? Can I look after all those people? You sign on the dotted line, that's your ship and your responsibility. But, you've got to respect that you get upset at times and you want something done now for you. You've got to remember you've got to do the same for your troops. It's not all about you.
And so when you transitioned out and finished your service time, did you join any veteran organisations?
I joined the RSL straight away and tried to, most of it was just to be in contact with other colleagues that have been out and experienced the same. Initially, for most of the other part of the time, was just going into and driving yourself in the civilian world. So there was a little gap at times, but I did, particularly when I went to Melbourne, just a couple of years after, I joined the Navy and Military Club, which is a very old club in Melbourne. It doesn't exist anymore. But we did very similar things to this, that we started an oral library from old admirals and everyone there. Unfortunately, when the club folded, we handed those tapes to the Australian War Memorial. But it was a thing that we found, again, with a lot of veterans. They wouldn't talk, they were in their 80s, but all of a sudden we could get them to a little bit open. Even their families had never heard some of the things they talked about. So that really felt wonderful. And then coming to Cairns has been absolutely brilliant. The pause have helped me immensely. And so throughout that, you just want to give back for those that helped you. And the more you do it, the more you find out how many people are out there that need it, particularly military people often will not ask. And it's just that through another coincidence you'll find that they were a veteran or they are suffering. And I think the RSL funds make themselves relevant to the new young veterans, and I think that's brilliant. So what we can give back, I think is wonderful, because what we've been given through the military and services outside, we should be very grateful, and a lot of us are. So.
And did your military experience influence your thinking about the Defence Force and about the military in general?
Yes. And one of the issues is, in America, a lot of serving over there, is that they are so patriotic and they respect their servicemen so much. Lots of discounts. You go to Disneyland, they just about welcome you in. You go on airlines, you get a military discount. A lot of people, when you get on a plane, if they know you're military, they cheer and they clap and all sorts. We don't do that out here. Vietnam veterans had a terrible time. But I think Australians changing, and I think that it makes you proud that you are. And seeing how the military are now, and they get more and more modern and more professional, which I find hard from generation to generation. But I also think with Anzac Day and all the children in the country now getting behind it, it makes you really feel proud of the military and very proud of the present military. So I think we should do everything we can to support them.
Would you go back?
Tomorrow. I have tried, but a couple of old military wounds have stopped me. But I envy to a degree those people who have been able to go back and do reserve time. But then it's a downside to that, because I think if I went back now, I would not have a clue of what's going on. All the ships are so modern and all the planes are so modern. I think they're way ahead of me now, but I'd love to try.
What injuries did you obtain during your service?
Broken skull, broken shoulders, knees, back, hearing loss. Where else do we go? Just in general, enough. PTSD. But it's just life. A lot of people have the same. You fall down a number of ladders, or particularly in boardings, when I was doing boardings as XO boats, etc. In heavy seas, and you're smashing on boats, or you jump up on a fishing boat and you put a sharp stick through your foot, and all sorts of things. Well, everyone does it, so. Hazard of the job.
So knowing what you know today and having the experiences that you have, what advice would you give young Adrian?
Young Adrian, I would say young Adrian, follow what you did, go to Naval College, and continue to do what you learn, particularly academic and professional. I think that's the best advice I'd give myself. The only other advice I'd give whilst I was in there would be to take up that positivity very early, because sometimes you can't do this, you can't do that. Never say that to anyone. But also go out whilst you're in there, in the defence, and get more professional courses under your belt. I dedicated my whole life to the front line, and because I didn't think I was able to, I didn't do a degree, I didn't do a master's, etc. And I think they're important to do because they keep you up to date. But young Adrian, just go back there, and just go back to the Naval College and start it again. Wonderful.
And is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered in the interview? Any stories? Any experiences?
No. I think you've weeded out enough. Enough to have a laugh at, or other people to go, ooh, that's not nice. No, it's a job in the military that just about every job you do is different. It's either you're at a naval, you're at a school teaching and you're head of that school, or you're on a patrol boat as captain or a destroyer, or you're on exchange with someone else. You're learning something different, or you're on a course in Canada in 10 foot of snow. Everything's different, yeah. Or you're at Naval College, bringing up the next group of young cadets or midshipmen or officers. Everything's different. Everything's a challenge. And I just think it's wonderful. It's very, very positive.
Yeah, it sounds like you formed some really special relationships while you were.
I have, and that's been really interesting. You can become a hermit, or you can. There's a lot of guys you're just not interested in. You never were at Naval College, but then you come other people in your different ships and whatever. So they, and when you're a young guy, you're 18, 22, 23. You're on a ship that's, a captain is 38, 42, 50. So you've got this massive change in age, but that grows you up very quickly, as does young able seamen and sailors. Now, young 21-year-olds in the military do so much more and are so wider in knowledge and experiences than a lot of their colleagues in the civilian world. They've seen it, they've done it, they've been given the responsibility. So I think that's fantastic.
Do you think civilians are generally naive?
It depends, but yeah, generally, unless they've got a link with the military, often they have got no idea what people do, and I just don't think people are aware that although we're not in a war situation, but we've got ships over in the Middle East, we've got the military in Afghanistan, etc. People hear about it, that's fine, but it just doesn't touch them. So unless they've got family or something, they just don't realise the effort and the danger that a lot of the people are in. And also, come Christmases or whatever, that there's several thousand Australians overseas peacekeeping or on station somewhere. These people, Australians just, I think, sometimes forget. Anzac Day is brilliant. But other times, it's only the families, etc., that get touched when it's Christmas or someone's birthday, etc. But I think, I think it's naive, but little things like relevant things by the RSL, etc., such as parcels out to the troops in the field, getting the schools to help provide a lot of that in time, if they know that as they grow up, I think society will change. So I think those wonderful things that are done here in relevancy go to the schools, those children grow to university, maybe they're then keener to go to the naval colleges or the defence academies, and also, direct recruit entry, or, reserves, people coming out of society and joining 51, etc. I think the relevancy, and we spread that and people contribute, that'll be great.
Yeah, and so in your opinion, do you believe that war works?
Very, very difficult. East Timor, a new country, stopped a lot of killing, has worked, they've now progressed on. I think not so much a war, but it was a conflict. That was great. But other conflicts, particularly very tribal, you can't get them all together, so how can you get the whole country together? It's difficult, but also the people and the politics behind it. If something drags on, then it becomes unpopular. You might have to doubt, but other times it's come in, it stopped at World War II, it dragged on, but it stopped a lot of terrible things happening and countries being invaded. Vietnam, question mark there. What was the outcome for our side versus eventually, if a country is really keen for for itself, it'll overcome major hurdles. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no, but in general, more yes than no.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and sitting down and having a chat with me.
It's been lovely talking to you here on BBC Two.
What's BBC Two?
The ABC in England.
Ah.
You'd be a magnificent interviewer.